Excel Tutorial 7, pages 411 to pages 419. You need to read page 410 regarding validating data entry and specifying validation criteria. Please make sure you read the whole thing before you attempt this. Alright, on page 411, to create the validation rule for the registration date cell. Step number 1, if you took a break, make sure the youth soccer workbook is open and the receipt worksheet is active. Alright, click on cell B3. Okay, there's B and there's 3. You're going to enter the data validation rule to ensure that a valid date is entered in the cell. On the ribbon, click the Data tab. In the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button. The Data Validation dialog box opens, so you need to click that one right there. If you're like me and you hit the down pointing arrow instead of the button. And you get your Data Validation dialog box. You use the Settings tab to enter the validation rule for the active cell. Here on the Settings tab right there. Step number 5. On the Settings tab, click the Allow arrow. See where it says Allow? And there's the corresponding arrow. And then click Date. Notice that the default is any value, so you could enter anything in that cell. Well, we only want you to be able to enter a date. The Data Validation dialog box expands to display the options specific to dates. Step number 6. Click the Ignore Blank checkbox to deselect it. There's Ignore Blank. I'm going to turn that off. You want to ensure that cell B3 is not left blank and require users to enter a date value in the cell. Step number 7. If necessary, click the data arrow right here. And then click greater than or equal to. There's the greater than or equal to. The dialog box reflects the selected criteria. Step number 8. In the start date box, enter 1/1/2010. 1/1/2010. Okay, that provides an example of what to look for when checking the cell. You cannot use data validation to simply check for the presence of data. You must provide an example for checking. See figure 7-16 and ensure that your data validation dialog box matches the one in that figure. Okay. Go ahead and click. They didn't tell us to click OK today, but I'm just gonna... Nope, we're still working on this. Don't click OK. Alright, read about validating existing data and creating an error alert style and message. To create the warning error alert for the registration date cell on page 412. Step number 1. Make sure cell B3 is still active and the data validation dialog box is open. Okay, that's where we are. In the data validation dialog box, click the error alert tab. You use this tab to select the type of error alert and enter the message you want to appear. Step number 3. Make sure that the show error alert after invalid data is entered. Okay, show error entered. Yep, that's checked right there. If unchecked, the error alert won't appear when an invalid value is entered in the cell, so you want to make sure that's turned on. Step number 4. Click the Style arrow. There's Style, down pointing arrow, and click Warning. This style allows the user to accept the invalid value, return to the cell and re-enter a valid value, or cancel the data entry and restore the previous value to the cell. Step number 5. Click in the title box. Okay, there's the title box right there. And then type invalid registration date. Stop and check your spelling really quickly. This text will appear as the title of the error alert box. Step number 6. Press the Tab key to move the insertion point to the error message box. Here's your error message box. You could, of course, click in it if you wanted to. And then type, you ready? Do you see that whole thing we have to type? Invalid registration date. Enter a registration date after 1/1/2010. If the date you entered is correct, click Yes. If it is incorrect, click No. If you are not sure, click Cancel. All right. Slow typers, you're going to want to pause the video while you type this whole thing in. I can feel mistakes as I'm typing, I swear. Alright, once you have it all typed in, you definitely want to go back and check and find your typos. Just go back and read every little bit, because it would be pretty embarrassing to have a big fat typo sitting in your own error message, right? Okay, once you have the whole thing in there and you've corrected all your typos, okay, go ahead and click OK. Alright, on page 413, read about creating an input message. To create an input message for the player name cell, select cell B4. There's B and there's 4. Step number 2, on the Data tab, in the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button. The Data Validation dialog box opens. Click the Input Message tab. You enter the input message title and text on this tab. Step number 4, verify that the Show Input Message when cell is selected checkbox, it has a checkbox right there. Show Input Message when cell is selected checkbox is indeed checked. Okay? If you uncheck this option, you cannot enter a new input message, and any existing input message will not be displayed when the selected cell becomes active. Step number 5, click in the title box and then type player name. This title will appear in bold at the top of the screen tip above the text of the input message. Press the Tab key to move the insertion point to the input message box and then type enter the player's first name. See figure 7-18, flip the page, and check and make sure that your data validation dialog box matches the one in figure 7-18. Okay, player name, enter the player's first name. When you have that correct, click OK. And as you can see, because we have that cell selected, you can see the little input message pop up. It says player name and enter the player's first name right there. Okay? All right. Read about creating a list validation rule. And then when you have that read, pop up to the top of page 415 to create a validation rule and an input message for the age group cell. Select cell B5. On the Data tab in the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button to open the Data Validation dialog box and then click the Settings tab. Click the Allow arrow and then select List. The dialog box expands to display the source box. Okay, see source right there. You can enter values separated by commas directly in the source box, or you can select a range of valid entries in the worksheet. Step 4. Next to the source box, click the Collapse button. Okay, that's that button right there. All it does is expand and collapse the dialog box. Select the range D4 to D10, which contains the 7 valid entry values. Okay, so we want D4 to D10. Okay, and that's our age group. Okay, it is the absolute value of D4 to the absolute value of D10. And then go ahead and hit your expand. Next, you'll create an input message and an error alert. Step 6, click the Input Message tab. Click in the title box. Okay, you always want to make sure that check mark right there is there. It has to be there. All right, what do we want to type? Age group. Okay. Now, let's go click in your input message box and click the arrow to select the player's age group. Okay. It's up to you whether or not you put the period on. It looks like it has it in your book, so I'll go ahead and pop it on. In the real world, when you're typing in this type of one-liner type input message, you don't always have to do that, but it's grammatically correct and your book has it, so we'll pop it on there. All right, click the Error Alert tab, and then make sure Stop appears in the style box. We've got Stop. You want to prevent a user from entering a value that's not included in the list of values that you specified. Okay? In the title box on the Error Alert tab, you're going to type in invalid age group. In the error message box, take a look at number 10 on the bottom of page 415. An invalid age group has been entered. Cancel. And then use the arrow to select a valid age group. Now this one definitely needs punctuation because you have multiple sentences. Real quick spelling check. Okay, flip to page 416 and compare your data validation box on your error alert tab to the one in that figure. When you have everything correct, go ahead and click OK. The data validation box closes, an arrow appears to the right of cell B5. Do you see it right there? Okay. And you have your screen tip. Go ahead and click that arrow button to the right of cell B5 to view the list of valid age group entries. And then you press your escape key. Okay, so they can hit this down pointing arrow and select the child's age. Okay, pretty simple so far. All right, the top of page 417, you know, this is a good time to click save. We've done quite a bit of work. To create list validation rules for the shirt size and sock size cells, select cell B6, which is our shirt size cell. You'll create a list validation rule for the shirt size cell. On the Data tab in the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button. Click the Settings tab, and we want to allow a list, right? And our source for this list is E4 to E8. 4 to E8, because we're working on our shirt sizes, and there they are right there. Okay, so we're going to have the absolute value of E4 through the absolute value of E8. The range contains the 5 values you want to allow users to select for the shirt size. Step number 4, click the Input Message tab, type shirt size in the title box. Okay, and then in the Input Message box, click the arrow to select the shirt size. All right, when you have that correct, always go back, check, 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 and then click OK. The dialog box closes. And it did, and I didn't put in my error alert, and that's okay, because you know what? We can go right back to it. It's no big deal. If you go ahead and hit OK too soon, like I just did, okay, you just stay right here on our shirt size group, and you're going to pop right back up here. Look, it opens right back up. Okay, and now when you go to our error alert tab, Verify that stop is entered because it has to be only the selections from our list. The title is invalid shirt size. And then our error message, an invalid shirt size has been entered. Click cancel and then use the arrow to select the shirt size. Okay. All right, let's go back and check our spelling. All right, now when we have all that entered is when we can actually hit OK. All right, the dialog box closes, an arrow button appears to the right of cell B6, and the input message appears as a screen tip. Select cell B7, which is the sock sizes, so that you can create the validation rule for the sock size cell. All right, if I told you to do this right now on your own, could you go do it? Sure you could. You click on the sock size on your data tab in the data tools group with your data validation. Is all of this sounding familiar? Okay, we're going to start with our settings. What are we doing? We're doing a list, correct? Where is the source of the sock sizes? It's right here, correct? F4 to F8. Okay, pretty easy so far. Now we're going to need an input message, right? And what's the title going to be? Sock size. Sounds pretty straightforward. And what would your input message be? Right? Click the arrow to select the sock size because we made a drop-down list. Okay, pretty straightforward. See what you're doing? All right, the last thing we have to do is the error alert. Okay, and because we're using a list, that's the only thing they can use, so you always use the stop style. And then for the title, invalid sock size. In our error message, an invalid sock size has been entered. Click cancel and then use the arrow to select the sock size. Always go back and check your spelling. And we're good, so go ahead and click OK. Here it comes, sock size. We always want to hit that down pointing arrow and just make sure that all of our sock sizes are there. We don't want any surprises. Pretty easy, right? All right, read that quick little paragraph about how Sharon also wants another validation rule to limit the early registration. All right, to create a list validation rule for the early registration cells, select cell B8. And there's B and there's 8. So you can create a validation rule for the early registration cell. On the Data tab in the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button. Okay, Data tab, this is very familiar to you at this point. Click the Settings tab, click List, in the Allow box, okay, so we did that, sorry, source box. This time, we are going to actually type our source in. So your source is going to be yes, comma, no. Okay, no spaces, just yes, comma, no. Because we don't have yes and no in here, we can't use, a ready to go select it. It's just yes or no. So we could actually type a source in as well as selecting a range of cells to be our source. Really good idea to make sure your yes and your no are spelled correctly. All right, take a look on the next page at figure 7-23 and make sure that your data validation settings tab reads exactly like the one in figure 7-23. All right, click the input message tab. Okay, the title is early registration. In our input message, click the arrow to select the correct response. And we'll need an error alert. Invalid early registration is the title. And our error message, an invalid response for early registration has been entered. Click cancel and then use the arrow to the right of cell B8 to select the response. That's a really poor error alert. I would never use that. I would never use a reference to a cell like that because some people wouldn't know what that meant, but that's okay. That's what they have, so we're going to do that. Error message. All right, here we go. Let's type it in. All right, get it all typed in. You know what I'm going to tell you to do because I keep saying things are invalid instead of invalid. Just correct any typos you have in there. And boy, I had a boatload in this one. Okay, get it all cleaned up, check every little thing, make sure everything is spelled correctly, and the checkbox is turned on in your show error alert. And when you have all that done, go ahead and click OK. As you can see, there it is. And there's your screen tip. All right, let's move on to create an input message for the registration date cell. Select cell B3. On the Data tab in the Data Tools group, click the Data Validation button. Click the Settings tab. The validation rule you created earlier is displayed. Click the Input Message tab. Type registration date in the title box. And go to your input message. Type enter the registration date and then check your spelling and type and click OK. Okay. All right, testing data validation rules. Whenever you create a data validation rule, you have to test it to see if it actually works. You certainly want to find any errors in it prior to your users, correct? So go ahead on page 418 and read about testing data validation rules. And when you have that read, we're going to move up the top of page 419 to test the data validation rules. Select cell B3. Okay, that's the registration date. Type 1/30/2004. And then press your tab key. The invalid registration date message box opens, informing you that the value you entered might be incorrect. Okay, do you see it? Invalid registration. This is everything we put in, right? Because it says date after 2010 and we put in 2004. Do you want to continue? Well, no, I do not. Okay. Type the current date and press your enter key. All right, whatever the current date is, you go ahead and type it in. And then press your enter key. And it popped in because we put in a valid date, right? Okay. All right, step number 3. In cell B4, type your name and press enter. Okay? We're just testing everything to make sure it works. Step number 4. Make sure that you're in cell B5. Click the down pointing arrow, and you're going to be U6 today. Okay, the value is accepted. The only way an error occurs in cells that have a list validation is if an incorrect entry is physically typed or copied into the cell. So now you're going to try typing in cell B6. All right, in cell B6, enter, so type LG, okay? And then press your enter key. An invalid age group has been entered. Click cancel and then use the arrows to select a valid age group. So go ahead and click cancel. Okay, you can use the down pointing arrow, okay, and select whatever you want. Okay, you can go through. All we're doing, you guys, is going through here and trying these out and making sure that they work. So we're just going to sit here and we're going to select whatever you want, but then put in something bad and press your enter key and see what happens. Just try it on all of them. It's no big deal. Sock size, I don't know, make up something. I want the yummy sock size. Doesn't work. Okay, just go through and try them all. Obviously, yes and no work on this one, but does Scram work? Nope. Okay, so once you've tried them all, that's just how you go through and test your rules and make sure that they work. Okay, that's all you have to do. Let's flip this back to yes. And I should probably go back and, you know, make sure I really do have what the book says instead of me just messing around and playing with them. But you know what? Messing around and playing with them is actually how you do it. You go through and you have to try every single entry and make sure it works. I only have you messing with like one, but in the real world, we would click every single one of these and make sure that they work before we put it out there for the end users, correct? Okay, so once you have all that done, you're set and you're ready to move on to your next video.